Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Lina. So on my channel I have already made a few videos about life in Australia and Sydney, and some of you seem to really like those, and I also received some more questions about it, and one of the questions was to talk about positives and negatives about living in Australia. So that's what I'm gonna do today. So without further ado, I'm gonna jump straight into the list that I have made for myself. I'm gonna start with the positives, and then I will discuss some negative aspects of living in Australia. That is just all from my own experience. So some of you may or may not agree with them, but anyway, I'm just gonna share my own experience and what I think about living in Australia. So starting with the positives, I think it is a really safe country to live in every way. I mean, you can just feel safe every day on the street, at home. You can feel safe for yourself, for your property, and all that. And the second thing, it's that the climate is generally pretty good. Of course, Australia is such a big country and it depends where you live. I've only been living in Sydney. I have traveled some more in Australia, but in Sydney the climate, I would say that generally it is pretty good. In winter it doesn't really get too cold, and summers are warm or sometimes really hot, but if you prefer like a warmer climate, then I think that would be an advantage for Australia, especially for those who are just afraid of cold weather and snow and minus temperature. So Australia definitely has a pretty warm weather the whole year around. And the third advantage would be beautiful nature. Of course, we have so many beaches, mountains, national parks, and it's just so very beautiful. The nature is just spectacular in Australia. So if you're a nature lover, there are always things to do, going for a swim, doing hikes, and just going to so many places, road trips. And Australia is great for traveling. So for those that are nature lovers, I definitely recommend to come to Australia for traveling, because the nature is just phenomenal. Okay, let's move on. So another very important positive aspect about living in Australia is that the economy is reasonably strong. Of course, it has its fluctuations, ups and downs, but you don't really feel that as a regular person. More or less, it has been stable in the last few decades, and I think that it's going to stay like that in the next few decades as well. So yeah, and needless to tell, that strong economy has advantages, because it provides you with jobs and with the stability, financial stability, and you can have a good quality of life. So I think that in Australia you can definitely have that. Another good thing that I love about Australia, and especially about Sydney, is a food culture, because there are so many different types of cuisines and restaurants that you can find in Sydney, and in general the food is really good, and it depends what kind of food you like. You always have a lot of choices. It comes from like a casual places, just the cafes, like breakfast, lunch cafes, all the way to in Australia we don't have like Michelin star rating, but there are definitely few restaurants that if you would have that rating, they would definitely have some stars. My favorite would be Bennelong. It's in the Opera House. So if you are in Sydney and you have a really special occasion or just want to treat yourself, that would be my recommendation for you. It's just amazing for food and for the view. But let's stay on our topic and let's move on. So another positive thing about living in Australia is that the lifestyle is really laid back, perhaps because we are surrounded by water and beaches, and the sun is out most of the time, and people just wearing, you know, like casual light clothes, just, you know, flip-flops, shorts, t-shirts, and walking around. Of course, people who work in the city, they have to wear like suits for work and things like that, but in the free time, people are really laid back, and even when you go out, you don't have to be like that dressed up. And it's not just about dressing up, just in general, people are quite casual, easy to talk with, and yeah, it's not I don't know, it just like feels really laid back, just a general feeling that you get like from the culture and from people. Another one is that I think that in Australia everyone has equal opportunities, which leads to another positive aspect, which is that Australia has a mix of cultures, and I think because of that is just, you know, so normal that in Australia we see people from everywhere in the world, and everyone really has equal opportunities to go and study, to get a job, and to start their businesses. It doesn't matter, you know, your race, your nationality, your age. I just really feel that Australia is really good with that, and I don't think that there would be some difficulties because of that. So I think that everyone has pretty much equal opportunities. And yeah, the mix of cultures, it just brings so much to the country. Getting back to the same food culture, that we have lots of different foods and, you know, and whatnot. It's just nice to see like a lot of people coming from different countries and living all together in peace, sharing their cultures, and I think it's just such a beautiful thing, in my opinion. And another one would be a healthy and fit lifestyle. Very much so where I live in my area, which is in eastern suburbs, which is by the water, and here we have a lot of like health stores and healthy cafes that serve like vegan or like paleo or gluten-free, and, you know, whatever healthy versions of food. It's based on whole foods, and you see a lot of people around exercising like all the time. When you get outside early in the morning, like everyone is running, or we have some like setups, kind of like outdoor gyms with like bars where people like to go and work out. There are so many gyms and yoga studios, Pilates, boxing, and just whatnot. You have so many choices. You always see people outside or in the gyms exercising, and everyone just generally seems very fit. I'm sure that the situation would be probably a little bit different like further in the suburbs, where is more like families based, but if you like a healthy and fit lifestyle, then I would say you should base yourself around eastern suburbs, and you will get a lot of that, a lot of options for working out and eating healthy. And the last but not least, it's a culture, and maybe it's a bit controversial one, because Australia is a young country, as you know, and a lot of people say that Australia doesn't have culture, and I agree that it doesn't have a big history. But if you live in a big city like Sydney in Australia, there's so much going on cultural wise. Like there are so many theaters, and we always have people coming from overseas to perform, and every week you can find you know, something to go and see, like a theater show or a gallery exhibition, or go to the museum, or go and listen to the live music. We have food festivals, just so many events, and I feel that Australia, and especially Sydney, is so rich with culture. And on Facebook I get notifications to different events that are happening around me, so there are always like it's like South American thing or Mexican thing, or like Indian food festival and whatnot, you know, like lots of different things. I think because so many different people from different countries are coming and settling down in Australia, they're bringing the culture with them. And because we have so many tourists that, you know, like to come here and go visit galleries and go to the theater, every time I go to the theater, like, it's full. And I know that there are a lot of people that appreciate culture here. And I think those people that are talking that Australia doesn't have a good culture, I think they are the ones that aren't really interested. Maybe they're living in their own like little bubble and they're not really researching about the events and things happening. And yeah, I think they're just not really interested. But that being said, of course it cannot compare to like European culture, which is the oldest continent on earth, you know. It doesn't compare to that. But in my opinion, if you're curious about culture, you will always have a lot of good choices for the things to do in Sydney. Okay, so those are the main things that make it so good to live in Australia, at least for me, or what I can think of right now. So now let's discuss some of the negative things. So the first one is that Australia is far away from, you know, from the rest of the world. It's just, you know, the country is an island and it's the whole continent, and the country is so big, so even to travel domestically, it can take 5 hours to fly from one city to another. And if you want to go to another continent, another country, then, you know, it is going to be very far. And that leads to the disadvantage being that to travel overseas is difficult and expensive, because wherever you want to go, even if it's quite close by, like Asia or something like that, it's going to be close to 10 hours or over 10 hours. But if you want to go to like Europe, US, it can be even over 20 hours. And because you're traveling for so long and so far, of course you have to spend more time there, and then everything becomes more expensive. That's why it's just not so easy as it would be in Europe. You can just, you know, make a weekend trip, just get on a Euro train and for a weekend go to like Paris, Italy or whatever. So in Australia, when you want to travel, you really have to plan it. You have to have a big budget, and you need to have a longer leave, so you have you know, enough days or weeks to go and really enjoy another country. So for me, this is definitely the biggest disadvantage, and because of that, I'm not able to see my family as much as I would like to, because they live in Lithuania, which is in Europe. So at the best, I get to see them once per year, if even that. So yeah, I think that is the biggest disadvantage. And moving further, another disadvantage is that the taxes are pretty high. Income tax, profit tax, and just so many taxes, property taxes, and all of them are very, very high in Australia. So yeah, that can make it a bit difficult if you want to like start a business, or even if you are working, if you employed in one place, and then if you get a second job, then the income tax on the second job is very, very high. You pay like around 40% out of the second income goes to your taxes. So it is, comparing to other countries, maybe it's not the highest tax rate in the world, but it's definitely would be in, I don't know, maybe top 10, top 20 highest tax rates in the world. And another disadvantage, or at least it is a disadvantage for me, on a day like today, it gets really hot. I don't know if you can tell that I am all sweating because I don't have a conditioning in my place, and it can get really challenging. Like, summer is nice if you go to the beach, if you go to the water for swimming, but you know, on a regular day when you just, you know, going around and doing your business, if you're not inside in your car, or inside in a building that has an air conditioning, it can get like really, really hot, like over 30 degrees as it is today. So I know that some people find it very hard to handle it, like myself. I know that others just enjoy all the time, like it's never too hot for them. I know there are places in the world that get even hotter, like Dubai or other places in Middle East and maybe somewhere else, but it does get very hot in Sydney sometimes during a summer, but a good thing is that it cools down after a few days. Like we had a few very hot days now, and tonight we should have a storm, which I'm looking forward to, because then the temperature always like goes down, it gets a bit more windy, so just I'm really looking forward to get some fresh air. So yeah, I don't know if that would be a disadvantage to everyone, but it is to me sometimes. But I'm dealing with it. I'm trying to not let it to ruin my mood, because you should not ever let weather to affect your mood, right? If the weather is your biggest problem in life, you're having a good life, right? Okay, so moving forward, another very big disadvantage about Australia, if you are a foreigner, that it's getting more and more difficult to get a visa for like a longer term. It's not difficult to get like a tourist visa or even students visa, but if you are looking more to settle down here, it's very hard to kind of like get a visa that is more like for a longer term, that has better terms and conditions, that doesn't have limitation like working limitations, traveling limitations, and others. And also it's quite difficult to get the permanent residency. It may take a long time, like for me it took years, and there are lots of different ways how you can get it. Most popular, I guess, it's one where you study, you get a degree, and then you do it through the skilled migration, but that takes a very long time. Every visa, every application takes a long time to process, and it's just really difficult if you want to come to Australia and settle down and stay here for good. But I hope that will not discourage you, and if you are looking at this opportunity, make sure you find a good migration lawyer that can look at your case and advise you which way is the best, because it's important that you don't waste time, because not every occupation is on the list for you to be able to apply for PR. So if PR is your goal, then make sure that you do take a look at the list of occupations that will allow you to apply for the permanent residency after you finish studying here. And another disadvantage is that it is very expensive, especially to buy a property. There are lots of taxes that come with it, and let alone the property prices are very high, and then it comes with lots of different taxes, like one-off taxes plus some ongoing taxes. And then it's quite expensive to rent an apartment or a house, and also car maintenance costs are very expensive. It's not that expensive to buy a car. I think comparing to other countries, it can even be cheaper than in Europe. But then you have to, insurance is quite expensive. You have to pay green slip tax, registration renewal every year, and when it all comes together, just even if it's an economical car, it just like all the costs come together, and it just makes it quite expensive. Although I have to mention that petrol is really not that expensive. It's around 1.5 Australian dollars per liter. So yeah, it's not that expensive. I think it's even more expensive in Europe. I'm not sure about US, but then like all the other taxes fees come together, and then it just makes it very expensive to own a car. And food, I would say, if you are shopping at the shopping centers and supermarkets and you're cooking at home mostly, it can be very, very affordable. Like the daily products, they aren't that expensive. I think that in some places in Europe it can even be more expensive, but if you do want to go out to eat, like dine and wine, especially to the nicer places, then of course the prices are, I think, quite similar, like in London, New York, and other the most expensive cities in the world. But what is least affordable is getting a property and renting a place and owning a car. I would say those are the least affordable things. And another disadvantage is a healthcare. Well, first of all, it's very, very expensive. Australia has a Medicare system that only citizens and permanent residents can take advantage of that. It means that they get some services for free or at a discounted rate, but it doesn't cover everything. But if you don't have that, then you must have a private health insurance, and again, it doesn't cover everything. It just covers the fraction of what you pay, and everything is just really expensive. Like any blood tests, it can cost like hundreds, or something a bit more difficult, it can cost even thousands of dollars. Dental care is very, very expensive. Just to do like a root canals for one teeth, it will cost you few $1,000s. And yeah, if you're coming to Australia even with a tourist visa for just a few months, I would say definitely go and see a dentist in your local area and make sure that you will not have some unexpected like dental issues or health issues. Go and get all the health checks, because here it is so expensive even if you do have a private health insurance, because anyway, first you have to pay everything yourself, and then you get back some of that money, but you need to have that money first to be able to pay for it. So if you are here and you will get some accident or some health issues, then it can be very, very expensive. So please keep that in mind. Before I moved to Australia, I went and had all my health checks and took care of my dental problems that I had. And yeah, and every time I go back to Europe, I always do the same. And the last, and it's not very big deal, I would say, but Australia is behind with fashion as opposed to US and Europe, of course. And again, you know, the opposite seasons also play a role in that, I guess. So we always like getting things from like last season or previous seasons. Of course, you can shop online, and not everyone is fashionista, and it's really not a big deal. It's just something that came to my mind as I was thinking about some negatives. Maybe people, there are some people that like to be fashionable and like to be surrounded by other fashionable people. Australia isn't that fashionable as Europe or US or some other places. So those are all the things that I could think of about the positive and negative aspects about living in Australia. If you are living here and you have something to add on top of that, please write it in the comments below. Or if you have any questions about today's video, also write it down in the comments below. Otherwise, that's all that I have for you for today. Please subscribe to my channel and give a thumbs up if you like this video, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!